So the topic is a reversible reaction. Reversible reactions, these reactions, the type of reaction in which the reactant can form product and the product can decompose to form reactant is known as reversible reaction. So reactant can form a product and product can form back the reactant again. We call that as reversible reaction. So means the reaction can proceed in both direction. So if a reaction can proceed in both directions, so we use arrows from reactant to product and from product to reactant. So reaction in which the reactant can form a product and the product can decompose and form back the reactant, we call that as reversible reaction. And for reversible reaction, we define a term, we call that as equilibrium. Equilibrium means the balance. So what is the meaning of equilibrium? Equilibrium means that the rate of the forward reaction means when the reactant is forming a product. So rate of forward reaction is equal to rate of the backward reaction and no change in concentration of reactant or product. Means the amount of reactant in product will not change and the speed of the forward and backward reaction is same. We call this as equilibrium. You have to learn this definition. You will find this as a 2-mark question, like define the term equilibrium. So equilibrium means the rate of forward is equals to rate of backward and there is no change in concentration of amount of reactant and product. Example, say you have 10 grams of reactant and you have 15 grams of the product. At certain point, you have 10 gram of reactant and you have 15 gram of product. As the reaction occur, because we know the reactant can form a product, say out of 10 gram, 1 gram of a reactant is forming a product. And out of 15 gram, 1 gram of a product is decomposing and forming back the reactant. So the amount of reactant in product will change. Out of 10 gram, 1 gram of a product is formed. Like out of 10 gram of a reactant, 1 gram reacted to form a product. And out of 15 gram of a product, at the same time, 1 gram of a product form back the reactant. So is there any change in the amount of reactant in product? So if there is no change in amount of reactant in product, what we call this state, we call this state as equilibrium or balance. It means that amount of reactant and it does not mean amount of reactant equal to amount of product. It means the rate of the reaction, the rate of the forward reaction is equals to rate of the backward reaction. Their speeds and rates are same, but you can see product is 15 gram where reactant is 10 gram. But out of 10 gram of a reactant, 1 gram is forming a product. And at the same time, out of 15 gram of a product, 1 gram decompose and form back the reactant. So the amount of product and amount of reactant does not change we call this condition as equilibrium or balance. But for example, if you have reactant in product, the reactants are forming a product and product is decomposing, forming back the reactant. So 10 gram of reactant was there and 15 gram of product. It's not necessary always 10 and 15. I'm just taking these as random values. Example, 1 gram of a product, 1 gram of a reactant is forming a product. But out of 15 gram, 2 gram of a product is decomposing and forming back the reactant. Is this in equilibrium? So it is not in equilibrium. So if it is not in equilibrium, which side balances more? Like which side rate is more? The decomposition is more. So if decomposition is more, what we call, how we define this term, we say that it is not in equilibrium, or we can say that the rate of backward is faster or higher, or we can use the term that equilibrium is shifted towards left or backward. Equilibrium shifted towards backward means that the rate or the speed of the backward reaction is faster as compared to. So what will happen if the speed of the backward reaction is faster? Amount of product will increase or decrease? So the amount of product, because when we compare, originally it was 10 and 15, but out of 10, now 1 gram is forming a product, and out of 15, 2 gram is decomposing. So the overall amount of the product will decrease. Or we can say the yield, the term yield means amount of the product. The yield will decrease. And what will happen to amount of reactant? Because the backward reaction is faster, so amount of reactant will increase. So if equilibrium, if a reaction, reversible reaction having a 3 possibilities, maybe equilibrium is there, the equilibrium might be shifted towards left hand side, or equilibrium might shift it towards right hand side. Like you have reactant is forming a product, example, 5 grams of reactant was there and 7 gram of product is there, and what you observe, out of 5, 2 gram is forming a product, but out of 7 only 1 gram is decomposing. So this is not in equilibrium. So if it is not in equilibrium, so where the equilibrium is shifted, so equilibrium is shifted towards right hand side or forward. towards right or forward. And if equilibrium is shifted towards right, it means that how the equilibrium is shifted, that is the next topic. We will discuss how the equilibrium can be changed. There are different factors which affect the equilibrium. But first thing, you should understand the condition that it may have equilibrium, it may not be in equilibrium. So equilibrium shifted towards right or forward means that the forward reaction is higher. And if equilibrium is shifted towards right, the amount of product or yield will increase. And amount of reactant will decrease. And the question, how a 10-gram reactant form a 15. Look, actually what happened, so these are the three conditions. You may have equilibrium. Equilibrium might shift toward left hand side, or equilibrium might shift it towards right hand side. Basically, when the reaction start, say you have A and B are the reactants. Even it's a reversible reaction, but you always start with the reactant. So A and B are the reactant, and you have C. The product is C. In the beginning, the start of the reaction always started with the reactant. So at the start, what happened? Example, you have 10 gram of A and B in the beginning. Okay. So when you have 10 gram of A and B, how much C will be there in the beginning? 0. Because the reaction did not start. Now you started the reaction. So when you start the reaction, first A and B will react and they will form a product C in the beginning. So in between, what happened? Like example, after some time, out of 10 gram, maybe 3 gram is already reacted. So, and form a product. So what happened? Because as the product start to increase, the product will also decompose. So as the product is decomposing, it depends. Like example, 7 gram of reactant is decomposing into 2 gram of a product, forming a 2 gram of product. But out of 3 gram of a product, only 1 gram is decomposing and forming back the reactant. Is this in equilibrium after some time? Is this
No.
not in equilibrium? Because the forward is faster, forward happening at a greater rate. So it's still the equilibrium is shifted towards right hand side. Then what happened? You will reach a point. It's not necessary amounts will be same. Maybe you're left with 4 gram of a reactant. Sorry. And you're left with 6 gram of a product. So out of 4 gram, if 1 gram is forming a product, or say 1.5 gram is forming a product, so and out of 6 gram, if 1.5 is forming back the reactant. So when the rates are equal, when the forward and backward reaction rates are equal, the amount of reactant in product will not change. So when the amount of reactant product will not change, what we call that as equilibrium. So equilibrium is not reached in the beginning. First you start a reaction, reactant form a product, product start to decompose, the backward reaction increases, the forward reaction decrease, and you will have a point where the two reactions happen with the same speed. So when the two reactions happen with the same speed, we have equilibrium or balanced. So this is what happened in a reversible reaction. The next topic will be how the reaction we can change or switch the equilibrium. There are factors which affects the position of equilibrium that we'll discuss in the next class. But the concept of equilibrium should be clear to you, that when the speed of the forward and the backward reaction is same and there is no change in concentration. Is it clear, the definition of equilibrium? So next part will be factors affecting the equilibrium, that we'll discuss next class tomorrow. I'll just mention the name. The equilibrium, the balance can be affected by amount of adding or removing the amount of product or reactant. Like I can change the amount of reactant product in the mixture, that can affect the balance. It can be affected by temperature, or it can be affected by pressure, only for gaseous reactant product. So these are the factors we will discuss tomorrow which affects the equilibrium. You don't find this chapter as a chapter, this topic, but this is also an important topic related to exam point of view. So tomorrow I will explain the factors affecting the position of equilibrium, and then I'll discuss the exam style questions related to this equilibrium. Any question related to the class? Okay, so I'll end the session and share the recording with you.